When Baron Trump walked into a quiet cafe, Dinah, the waitress, thought it would be just another ordinary shift. She had no idea that what he would leave behind, a simple note and a generous tip, would leave her in tears and spark a wave of discussion across the country. The warm aroma of espresso mingled with the faint sweetness of freshly baked pastries, filling the air. The afternoon lull dragged on, with conversations fading into a soft murmur. For Dinah, the shift felt never-ending, each tick of the clock drawing the day out longer. The clinking of plates and silverware only reminded her how many hours she'd already spent on her feet. She wiped the last table by the window, stealing a glance at her phone. Just one more hour to go. Her thoughts lingered on looming bills, rent was due in 2 days, and her phone service was already overdue. Tips that day had been sparse, mostly loose change tossed onto tables by hurried customers glued to their phones. With a sigh, Dinah tightened her ponytail, grabbed her notepad, and prepared to push through. Her manager, a woman with lines of fatigue etched into her face, gave her a knowing look that seemed to say, "Just hang in there." But Dinah had already switched to autopilot. The soft chime of the cafe door startled her back to reality. A young man stepped inside, tall and lean, his plain shirt and slacks giving him an effortless air of elegance. 2 men followed closely, their sharp eyes discreetly scanning the cafe. Dinah blinked, momentarily thrown off. Their presence felt unusual for this unassuming spot, not exactly a haunt for high-profile visitors. Who would come here with security? Her pen hovered over the pad as recognition flickered. But professionalism took over, and she approached the table where the young man had seated himself in the far corner. "Good afternoon," Dinah greeted, summoning her best customer service smile. "Can I start you off with something?" He looked up and for a moment, her practiced smile faltered. His face was striking yet familiar. A calmness radiated from his expression, jogging her memory. And then it clicked. Barron Trump. She had seen his face countless times in the media as the youngest son of the former president. Her pulse quickened, but she reminded herself of her training. Stay composed. He was just another customer. "I'll have a cappuccino and one of those croissants," he said softly, his tone polite and reserved. "Absolutely. Anything else?" she asked, her voice steady. He shook his head. "That'll be perfect. Thank you." His words were simple, yet something about the way he spoke, gentle, perhaps sincere, stuck with her. Dinah scribbled the order and headed back to the counter, trying to shake the odd flutter in her chest. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe nerves, but something about the moment stayed with her. As she prepared the coffee, Dinah found herself glancing back toward his table. Barron sat quietly, his posture relaxed yet poised. Unlike the other patrons engrossed in their phones or laptops, he simply gazed out the window, lost in thought. Occasionally, he sipped water from the glass she had brought earlier. By the time the cappuccino and croissant were ready, Dinah had calmed herself. Balancing the tray, she approached his table with practiced ease. "Here you go," she said, setting the items down carefully. He looked up, offering a faint smile. "Thank you." "You're welcome. Let me know if you need anything else," she replied, her tone polite but neutral. As she turned to head back to the counter, something made her pause. Maybe it was the feeling of his eyes lingering on her, not intrusive, just quietly observant, or maybe it was her own exhaustion making her hyper-aware. Either way, Dinah felt her heart flutter again. She pushed the thought aside and busied herself, cleaning empty tables and refilling sugar containers. The cafe had grown still once more, the only sound the faint murmur of background music drifting from the speakers. Yet, there was a peculiar weight to the room now, an unspoken tension pressing against her, urging her to stay alert. From the corner of her eye, Dinah noticed Barron pull a pen from his pocket. Leaning over the receipt, he scribbled something quickly, almost secretively, before folding the paper and tucking it neatly beneath his empty coffee cup. Then he stood, casually gathering his phone and coat. Dinah tried not to stare but couldn't help the quick glance she stole as he walked past her. "Thank you for coming," she said softly, her voice catching just slightly. Barron paused, turned his head ever so slightly, and offered a small, sincere smile. "Have a good day." Those words hung in the air longer than they should have, leaving Dinah frozen for a moment in the middle of the cafe, her eyes following him as he stepped out with his security close behind. The bell above the door chimed softly as it swung shut, and then silence fell once more. She exhaled, slowly steadying herself, before grabbing her tray and walking toward the now empty table. The cappuccino cup sat drained, with just a faint ring of foam clinging to the bottom. The croissant plate was reduced to scattered crumbs. But then she saw it. The receipt. Dinah picked it up gingerly, the folded paper feeling heavier in her hand than it should have. Her first thought went to the tip. Perhaps it was generous, But that wasn't unusual with wealthy patrons. They often left large tips, more out of habit than care. But as she unfolded the receipt, her breath caught. At the bottom, beneath the total, was a number that made her knees go weak, a tip so astonishingly large it didn't feel real. 4 digits stared back at her, crisp and clear. Above it was a handwritten note: "Your kindness and hard work don't go unnoticed. My family has been where you are. Stay strong. Brighter days are coming." Dinah's hands trembled as she read the words again, slower this time, letting every syllable sink in. Her gaze darted to the door where Barron had exited just moments ago, and her vision blurred as hot tears welled in her eyes. Her knees gave out slightly, and she sank into the chair across from where he'd been seated, unable to look away from the note and the tip. It wasn't just about the money. It was the words, the weight of compassion etched in ink by someone she'd never dreamed would notice her. For the first time in what felt like forever, Dinah felt truly seen. Tears streamed freely down her face as the significance of the note settled over her like a warm blanket. She thought about the message, its promise of hope, and the unexpected kindness of a stranger. But the moment wasn't over, not yet. Someone else would see the note, and what had just happened would ripple far beyond the walls of this quiet cafe. The sound of the cafe door opening jolted Dinah from her thoughts. She quickly wiped her face with the back of her hand, tucking the note carefully into the pocket of her apron. Her manager approached, her expression tinged with concern. "You okay?" her manager asked, her brows furrowing. "What happened?" Dinah hesitated, struggling to find the words. I'm fine," she finally managed, though her voice cracked slightly. "Just a really generous tip." Her manager's eyebrows rose in disbelief. "Generous enough to make you cry?" Dinah nodded, letting out a shaky laugh. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the folded receipt, and handed it over. As her manager's eyes scanned the number, she let out a low whistle. "No way. Who left this?" "The corner table," Dinah replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper. It was Barron Trump. Her manager blinked, clearly stunned. "The Barron Trump? Are you serious?" "Yeah," Dinah said, pulling the note from her pocket. "But it's not just the money." She carefully handed over the note, treating it like a fragile artifact. Her manager read it in silence, and for the first time in months, Dinah saw a softness in her boss's expression. "Wow," her manager whispered, handing the note back. That's something else." "It really is," Dana murmured, folding the note carefully, as though it were a priceless artifact. "I don't even understand why he wrote it. I didn't do anything special." Her manager studied her for a moment, her expression softening. "Sometimes people just know, Dana. They see what you're going through, even when you think you're hiding it. You're here every day, working yourself to the bone, always kind to everyone, even the ones who don't deserve it. Maybe he noticed that." Dinah swallowed hard, her throat tightening with emotion. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words. For months, she'd been barely keeping her head above water, working double shifts just to cover rent, skipping meals to pay for her mom's prescriptions. Through it all, kindness had been her one act of defiance, the one thing she wouldn't let the world take away from her. And somehow, he had seen that. As the minutes passed, the atmosphere in the cafe began to shift. A quiet buzz of curiosity hummed through the air. By the pastry case, a couple of coworkers whispered, occasionally glancing toward the corner table where Barron had been seated. News spread quickly. Before long, one of the baristas approached her, wide-eyed and grinning. "You were the one who served him, right?" the girl asked, her voice tinged with disbelief and excitement. "What was he like? Did he say anything?" Dinah smiled faintly. "Yeah, he was really nice." "Man, I'd totally freak out," the barista laughed, shaking her head. "That's so wild." Dinah didn't say anything more. She didn't mention the note or the tip. Sharing it felt wrong, like revealing a private moment that wasn't meant for anyone else. For now, it was hers alone. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. Yet somehow, everything felt lighter. Every table she cleared seemed less of a burden, every interaction with a customer less draining. When she finally pulled off her apron at the end of the day, the folded note was still tucked safely in her pocket, close to her heart. As she headed to the subway station, Dinah found herself pulling the receipt out once more. She stared at the words, letting them replay in her mind. "My family has been where you are. Stay strong. Brighter days are coming." She whispered the message under her breath, as though saying it aloud might make it truer, more tangible. He didn't have to write that, she thought. He didn't have to care. And yet he did. As the subway train rattled through the tunnels, Dinah closed her eyes and allowed herself, for the first time in months to believe. Maybe, just maybe, things could get better. But Dinah had no idea just how far this small moment of kindness would spread. The next morning, sunlight barely filtered through her apartment window when her phone buzzed incessantly on the nightstand. Groaning, Dinah rolled over to check it. Dozens of notifications filled the screen. "Why is everyone texting me?" she mumbled groggily, squinting at the messages. "Girl, is this you?" one read. "You're famous," another exclaimed. Her thumb hovered over a message with a link attached. Clicking it, she was met with a screenshot of an article headline. Dinah sat up so quickly her heart felt like it might burst from her chest. The article laid out the story in perfect detail. A struggling waitress, a high-profile guest, a note filled with empathy, and a life-changing tip. A photo of her note, in Barron's unmistakably neat handwriting, was featured prominently in the article. Her hand shook as she scrolled, overwhelmed. "How did this happen?" she whispered aloud. Another message from a coworker appeared. "That guy at table 5 yesterday?" Someone must have seen the note and snapped a picture. "It's everywhere now." Her heart sank. Everywhere? She opened her social media apps. Sure enough, the note had gone viral. It was on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Every platform flooded with hundreds of comments. "This is what the world needs more of. Barron Trump seems like such a kind soul. I don't care what anyone says, this is beautiful. Wait, what about the waitress? Is she okay?" Dinah read comment after comment, feeling more overwhelmed with each passing moment. Strangers were dissecting her life, debating her story without knowing anything about who she really was. Dinah let her phone fall onto the bed and pressed her hands to her face. "What am I supposed to do now?" she whispered. From the next room, the sound of her mother's cough pulled her back to reality. She didn't have the luxury of falling apart, not with bills overdue and groceries to buy. Shaking off her unease, she grabbed her bag and headed out the door, but the uneasy knot in her stomach refused to fade. The world now knew her story, and she wasn't ready for that. The moment Dinah stepped into the cafe, she sensed the change. All eyes seemed to be on her. Coworkers greeted her with proud, almost admiring smiles. A few regular customers glanced her way, clearly trying to confirm if she was the waitress from the story. Even her manager gave her a grin that was far too wide. "You're a local hero now," her boss teased. Dinah gave a half-hearted shrug. "I don't feel like one." "You should," her manager replied, resting a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "What happened yesterday was something special, Dinah. Not everyone gets to experience something like that." The words were meant to comfort her, but instead, they left her feeling raw and exposed. She wasn't special, just a waitress doing her job. And Barron Trump? He hadn't written the note for attention. The weight of the world's gaze felt heavier with every step she took, even if they weren't physically there. Dinah spent the morning dodging questions from customers and coworkers, forcing polite smiles whenever someone mentioned that nice young man or commented on what he wrote to you. But by lunchtime, the situation spiraled further out of control. A news crew had arrived. Cameras, microphones, reporters. The whole scene unfolded just outside the cafe doors. "You've got to be kidding me," Dinah groaned, watching as her manager spoke to one of the reporters. Her stomach churned when one of them caught her eye and waved, as though inviting her to join the spectacle. "You're famous," a coworker teased, laughing. "Lucky me," Dinah muttered, ducking behind the counter. Pulling out her phone, she skimmed the latest headlines. The comments poured in faster than she could read them. That note probably saved her life. This is the kind of kindness the world needs. A reminder that small gestures can mean everything. Amidst the chaos, a small glimmer of hope flickered within her. This wasn't just about her anymore, it was about something bigger, about people remembering that even the smallest acts of kindness could create ripples. Still, Dinah knew she had one more decision to make, and it would shape the ending of her story. By the time her shift ended, the cafe felt impossibly small, like the walls were closing in under the weight of all the attention. Slipping out the back door, Dinah avoided the reporters still loitering out front. The cool air hit her face as she stepped onto the pavement, finally allowing herself to exhale. The walk home was eerily quiet, every street seeming slightly off, like the world had shifted without her realizing it. Clutching her bag tightly, Dinah felt the folded note inside, still safely tucked away. Her phone buzzed with yet another message. "Dinah, they want you on the morning show, call me." It was from her manager. Dinah stopped mid-step, staring at the message. The thought of going on television made her stomach churn. She didn't want to broadcast her face or her life for everyone to dissect. But then a small voice in her head whispered, "Wouldn't it be nice to tell your side?" To remind people that this wasn't about fame or money, but about kindness? She stood frozen, phone in hand, before finally shoving it into her bag. She wasn't ready to decide. Not yet. When Dinah arrived home, she found her mother sitting in her recliner, idly flipping through TV channels. Suddenly, a familiar voice echoed from the screen. A simple note left by Barron for a hard-working waitress is touching hearts across the country. Dinah froze in the doorway. On the television was a blurred image of the receipt. Her note, accompanied by the headline, "A quiet act of generosity sparks a national conversation." Her mother looked up, coughing softly. "That's you, isn't it?" Dinah sighed, dropping her bag onto the floor. "Yeah, Mom, that's me." Her mother's gaze softened as she gestured for Dinah to sit beside her. "It's a good thing, you know. People need stories like this." "I didn't ask for this," Dinah murmured, crossing her arms. "Sometimes good things find you when you're not searching for them," her mom replied softly, reaching out to squeeze Dinah's hand. "What he wrote, that was special. People are talking about it because they need to believe in kindness again. You're part of that now." Dinah swallowed hard. It feels too big for me, Mom, like I don't deserve it." Her mom shook her head gently. "Don't say that. You work hard every single day to keep us afloat. You're kind to people, even when you're exhausted. That's who you are, Dinah. And someone noticed. Someone chose to remind you that you matter." Tears welled up in Dinah's eyes, but this time she didn't hold them back. Her mom was right. The note wasn't just about her. It was about hope. It was about showing people that even the smallest acts of kindness carried meaning, that they still held power. That night, Dinah lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her thoughts racing. Her phone buzzed again, but she didn't need to check it to know it was more messages, more questions, more noise. Yet under her pillow lay the note, a tangible reminder that someone unexpected had seen her. For the first time in a long while, Dinah didn't feel invisible. The next morning, she made a decision. Picking up her phone, she called her manager. "Tell the morning show. I'll do it," she said quietly. Her manager was stunned. "Are you sure?" "Yes," Dinah replied, her voice firm. "But I'm not going to talk about the money. I want to talk about the note. About kindness. That's it." The interview was simple. Dinah sat nervously on a couch, her hands folded tightly in her lap as the host leaned in with a warm smile. "Dinah, your story has captured the hearts of so many these past few days. A note and a generous tip from Barron. Can you tell us what it felt like when you first read it?" Dinah hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Honestly, it took me by surprise. It wasn't about the money, it was the words. I've been going through a hard time, and those words meant more to me than I can explain." The host nodded gently. The note said, "Your kindness and hard work don't go unnoticed. My family has been where you are. Stay strong, brighter days are coming." What do you think he meant by that? Dinah glanced at the camera, suddenly feeling as though she wasn't just speaking to the host, but to everyone watching. "I think he meant that no matter who you are, no matter what family you come from, we all face struggles. And sometimes, when you're at your lowest, the smallest act of kindness can change everything. It reminds you that someone sees you, and you're not alone." For a moment, the studio fell silent, her words hanging in the air. The host smiled warmly. "That's a beautiful message, Dinah. If Barron is watching, is there anything you'd like to say to him?" Dinah's voice wavered, but she smiled through it. "Just thank you. Not for the money, but for seeing me. For reminding me to hold on to hope. You made more of a difference than you know." When the interview aired, Dinah didn't check her phone. She didn't read the comments or skim the headlines. Instead, she went to work the next day, her apron tied neatly, feeling lighter on her feet. The cafe was busier than ever, with customers offering her warm smiles. They didn't treat her differently because of the story, they simply looked at her with sincerity. Some left kind notes on napkins, others tipped a little extra, and many took the time to say thank you, like they meant it. Dinah kept Barron's note tucked safely inside her wallet, where it would remain for years. It was her reminder that even the smallest gestures could ripple into something far greater, that a few heartfelt words could offer hope. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can change a life. Whether it's a kind word, a helping hand, or simply letting someone know they matter. Who can you uplift today? Remember, brighter days are ahead for all of us. Sometimes, we just need a little reminder. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who might need it today. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire, challenge, and bring us closer together.